All right, there has been a lot of focus over the past couple of weeks on a new election law in Georgia. Critics say it will make it harder for some people to vote. Supporters say it will protect the integrity of Georgia's elections, even though, of course, there was no evidence of widespread fraud this past November.
Major League Baseball moved its All-Star game out of Atlanta, and U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the minority leader, said this, which got our attention.
What are they going to do about the Mets and the Yankees? New York has a more restrictive voter participation law than the new Georgia law.
Is that true? Joining us live to talk about it is Jim Gardner, the Bridget and Thomas Black SUNY Distinguished Professor at UB's Law School. He is a former interim dean and vice dean for academic affairs, and we're certainly glad that you're joining us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Very good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, Professor, a few quick notes for our viewers. There has been a lot of discussion about what Georgia just changed. We're not really going to get too much into that, but I do think it's interesting, this idea of comparing Georgia to other places, including here in New York. You know, Georgia requires a photo ID to vote in person. It also has new ID requirements for absentee. New York does not have that. However, Georgia does have no excuse absentee voting, and it has more days of early voting. Do you think New York's voting laws are more restrictive than Georgia's, as the minority leader suggested?
Well, it's very hard to do a point-by-point comparison. They differ in a number of different ways. But I think there's a couple of important points. One is New York's law, unlike Georgia's, New York's are moving in the right direction and have been moving in that direction for a couple of years. And number two, there's an enormous difference between the regulations that are being adopted in Georgia and what New York is doing. Georgia's changes to the law are partisan measures intended to give a partisan advantage to Republicans who control the legislature and make these laws. New York's election laws need improvement. There's no question about that. But the problems that we have in New York with voting are not generated by a partisan desire to suppress one party or the other.
You talk about New York's laws needing improvement, and Michael and I had this conversation as well, talking about this presenting an opportunity to kind of look in the mirror. What do you think New York needs to do in terms of catching up with a lot of the rest of the country with more days of early voting and other popular measures like that?
Yeah, well, let me start with the positive. So there have been some positive changes recently. We have early voting now in New York. Previously, we did not. We have a statewide system of voter registration transfer. Previously, it was only at the local level. The legislature fixed a bad campaign finance loophole. We're going to have public financing for statewide elections in the state. We have an independent districting commission. So these are all steps in the right direction, very positive. But what was the starting point? The starting point was not good. In 2018, New York was 43rd nationwide in turnout and 47th in voter registration rate. So that's really embarrassing. You know, some of the things that we need to do, I think, are to make voter registration much easier, to improve the quality of ballot access. So right now, the ballot access is hard. I think redistricting needs to be improved. I mean, there's a long list of things we can talk about.
Yeah, and finally, we've got probably about a minute or a little longer. Some of the changes that many New Yorkers would like to see here, like same-day voter registration, and then, of course, no excuse absentee, will require changes to the state constitution. It seems like there is pretty strong support to see that happen. Do you think that that's going to be the reality in the coming years?
It certainly looks that way. There seems to be some momentum ahead of steam to address these particular kinds of laws. Now, if you look at the larger sense of democracy in New York State, there's still lots of other things that could be addressed, like governance by 3 men in a room. Would be the big one. You know, this bipartisan gerrymander of the state legislature is over for now, but we want to make sure that it stays over.
We've been chatting with Professor Jim Gardner, an election law expert. Thanks for being here tonight, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly hope maybe some of our lawmakers were watching this segment, and we'll continue to follow whatever changes to state election law happen in Albany. Thank you, everybody, for watching our town hall on this Wednesday. You can text us any questions or comments you may have to 849-2200.